Good morning. I'm Helen De Kaiser, Chair of the League of Women Voters of Weston. And on behalf of our league, I'd like to welcome everyone to this, the final candidate debate of our election season offerings. We were planning on having the police commissioners debate after this planning and zoning debate, but as of early last week, it was pretty unclear and looked like we'd have only 2 of the 4 candidates. And since they were all safe seats, we made the decision not to offer that as well. If you'd like to learn about those candidates, in addition to all of the candidates, and we had 100% participation, we have a voter's guide 2021 that is posted as of mid last week on our new website. The address is LWV Weston CT.org. And on that site, right on the bulletin on the homepage, you can link directly to the voter's guide, and you also can link to past debates that have taken place already this month. I'd like to have you explore the site at that time, consider joining us and supporting our work. I'd like to thank all of the league members who behind the scenes have made possible this year's candidate debates and the voter's guide. I'd like to thank the candidates very much for stepping up and running to serve our special town. And I'd like to thank Celeste LaCroix, who is the president of the League of Women Voters of Westport, for being today's moderator. Celeste, to you.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everybody. This is an honor to be here. I just want to tell you about the format. All of our candidates have been given the rules of the road, but I want to go over them with the audience. We're starting off our first questionnaire. We'll have 1.5 minutes to answer, followed by the following candidates will be given a minute. And we'll be rotating those questions. You can't see them, but we have timers that the people who are answering the questions can see, and they are going to be holding the candidates to their allotted time. All right, I want to introduce the candidates now, and if they could each wave to you. We have Megan Lucas. There she is. All right, and James Carlin, Harry Falber, Sally Korsh, and Alex Burns. And these are your candidates for planning and zoning. We're going to start with the questions. I want you to realize that these questions were developed by a committee in Weston. As moderator, I'm basically just the traffic cop. So you will be given these questions in the order that I was given them, and they were prepared by a Weston committee. So let's get started, all right? And the first question is going to go to Megan Lucas start, and then a minute rebuttal from the following candidates. First question, what changes, if any, would you like to see in the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Well, first off, thank you, Celeste, for having us here today, and everyone who's joining this webinar. As a member of the Planning and Zoning, as a member of the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I've sat on for the past 2 years, I've seen quite a few appeals come in front of us having to do with setback issues for properties that are non-conforming, which is under 2 acres. They have accessory dwellings that are within the setbacks, basically all the setbacks. So all these people have a lot of hardships. They come in front of the ZBA asking for an easement, and you know, typically these detached garages are in disrepair or not sufficient for today's needs. And because these sites are so restricted by our setback requirements, they can't even relocate them to similar structure on their property. Zoning is not one size fits all. And when one restriction appears so frequently in front of the ZBA, it's worth taking a look and finding ways to alleviate hardship for homeowners. I think that this could come in the form of reduced setback requirements for lots that meet certain minimum standards. And this is one change I'd like to see implemented.
Thank you, Megan. The same question to James Carlin.
Well, thank you very much, Celeste, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for having us this morning, and thanks to my fellow candidates for all their time and efforts. I don't disagree with Megan at all. The caution would be that one thing we always have to be mindful of is that we don't enact regulations to deal exclusively with specific problems for specific homeowners. So while zoning is not a one-size-fits-all approach, it can't really be employed when you've got so many idiosyncrasies like our town does. You do have to have some consistency, and you have to avoid spot zoning. On the issue of non-conforming properties in town as a class, I do agree. There are a number of them. I'm sitting in one of them right now. And it's just a creature of how our town has been developed over time. As a member of the commission, I'd be happy to have this conversation with my fellow commission members. And if we all feel that modifications would be possible and helpful, then I'm sure we would have a robust conversation about it. So I thank Megan for highlighting that issue.
Thank you. Mr. Falber, same question, 1 minute.
What I'd really like to see in the Planning and Zoning Commission is perhaps a more collaborative approach and how we speak about the different things that affect Weston. We need regulations, but regulations are just that. They're sort of like an artificial guideline to me. And I think we really have to be more compassionate. We have to look at more innovative ways to accomplish things. We have to look at more creativity, and we have to have a holistic view of how we treat our fellow neighbors.
Thank you. Ms. Kosh, same question to you.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the league, and I'd like to thank you, Celeste, and our fellow candidates as well. Oh, and Cole also, who's doing the timing. I think that we do need to deal with regulations as they are. They're put in place so that we do have a standard by which we are able to regulate land use. I really appreciate, Megan, your comments. And I think what that does is that highlights that we need to get feedback from our citizens and our other boards to find out what those issues are in the town that can be addressed by creative zoning, creative policy that might enable us to have a better standard for looking at those issues, that might enable us to have guidelines, maybe not even zoning regulations, but guidelines that help us to look at those things. But I think it's really, as Harry said, a collaborative process. I like to think we need collaboration as well within the town committees and the town departments to make sure that we know what those issues are. I'd like to see that.
Thank you. Mr. Burns, same question.
Well, I'd just like to start by thanking you, Celeste, and the League of Women Voters and all the candidates for coming out this morning. Well, I think what's important is just sort of catching up with the times a little bit. I sometimes think that some of our regulations may be a bit, not antiquated, but just a bit dated. And I think taking a look over all of them, sort of echoing what Mr. Falber said, and a collaborative approach, sort of examining them and reviewing them and seeing how we can update them effectively and make it easier for everyone to live in Weston. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, and that we will start with Mr. Carlin on this one. Weston has earned the Bronze Sustainability Connecticut certification from Eastern Connecticut State University. What steps do you think the commission could take to continue this environmental stewardship?
I think one of the steps that we've already taken in the context of devising the new village district regulations is to make sure that we are focused on sustainability and to make sure that sustainable measures are part of what we would like to see implemented in new development within that district. So you're talking about, building materials that meet certain environmental standards, energy efficiency in design and construction of structures within the new village district. That was a very important part of our aim and our goal in coming up with those regulations. So I think what you're seeing going forward is that sustainability is really going to be a hallmark of future development in our town. And again, I don't think this is a partisan issue when it comes to our Planning and Zoning Commission. I think everybody is committed to it, and we all recognize the importance of it.
Thank you. Mr. Fallberg, same question.
Well, sustainability to me has always been extraordinarily important. I wrote the original U.S. Green Building Council's marketing strategy probably 2 decades ago. So, and I look at our town, and we look at things like water management, how our roofs are constructed. We have the potential now to go with living roofs, using different materials that are anti-reflective, that will actually bring heat into our homes. And we also have to look on how we deal with our land management, and that is extraordinarily important. I think at one point we're going to have to address if someone wants to clear cut their property, to say, okay, it's your property, you have a right to do that, but we have some thoughts on how you should plant different types of greenery.
Thank you. Ms. Koch.
I'm really proud that we are bronze medal, and I think that's a great thing. And I think that we need to be sure that we preserve that and hopefully increase that, and maybe we can get to silver. I agree with Jim. I think that our efforts on the Village District distinctly looked to those areas of sustainability that we can affect. I see this as great progress for the town to try to codify those things that we can: building materials, plantings, water, sewer. The idea that we have a stewardship role in preserving our town, and not just our town, but as well the environment around us, wherever that may be. And I think we're making those steps. I'm proud of the way we've done it, and I know that we will continue to do that.
Mr. Burns.
Well, echoing what Ms. Korsh said about hopefully going up to silver, if not gold, in the near future. I think one of the things that makes Weston special is the nature that surrounds us. And I'm thrilled to see that everyone, both Republican, Democrat, and otherwise, seems to think that sustainability is important. Our town has, throughout its history, emphasized this and followed zoning regulations that have made it possible to get to that bronze medal. And I'm glad to continue, or to see that we're continuing that by, as was said by Jim and Sally, that we're codifying those sorts of elements that make, or that continue to make Weston a very environmentally sustainable town. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas.
Thank you. Following what Jim and Sally said, and thank you, Jim, Sally, and Harry, for writing our village district and implementing all of those sustainability efforts. I think our town could take a step further by educating the public and talking more about the overall carbon footprint of our town. One thing that could happen is electrifying all of the new construction, which is not allow gas heaters. And this is something that's actually happening across the country. It's very exciting. Massachusetts, I believe, outlaws gas heaters in the entire state. And I think we are well positioned to make changes in our town that could become implemented regionally and then statewide, and make really great strides towards a more energy efficient future.
Thank you. The next question will be started by Mr. Fallberg. And the question is outreach and education. The new town plan of conservation and development document is comprehensive and informative for residents old and new. It is a lengthy document. How will you inform residents of the key components, and will there be public workshops?
Yeah, that's probably one of the most frustrating things that I've felt over the last 3 years since we worked on the POCD. I think a mere fraction of Westonites have ever looked at it, seen it, understand it. care about it. And we, as a Planning and Zoning Commission and as sustainability, beautification, environmental impact, all our committees, all are, we have to be constantly out there speaking to the community, making it simple to understand, knowing what it means. And it was, I've had issues, from the get-go with parts of it. Part of it I believe in. I think we need to show our neighbors that we conduct environmental impact studies. We conduct economic impact studies. We don't look 10 years out. We look, what can we do in the next year, next 2 years? What are the differences we can make for our residents today that can impact on our residents 5, 10 years out? And who knows, we may have air cars that, that we're going to deal with, or self distancing cars. So I even question why we need to turn our town center into basically a 4-lane highway by building 2 turn lanes north and south of Weston Road. And I think we need that engagement from our fellow residents.
Thank you. Same question to Ms. Karsh.
I look at the plan of conservation and development as a living document. And I think it's one that we constantly do look at, certainly as a commission. We know what's in there. We had many public workshops about it. And I think it is something that as a plan does reflect what the time was when it was developed and will continue to do so as time goes forward. So I think that, to the extent that the public is unaware of certain issues, I believe that as time goes forward, each one of those issues of necessity comes forward. We look at it again, we take direction from the public, and we work within our statutory constraints to try to continue to make it a living plan.
Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Well, I think what's important is reaching out to people. And in this modern day, we're on Zoom right now having a discussion, and I think we really don't have an excuse not to give the citizens of Weston every means to communicate with the commission. And that means making it, obviously sending out Zoom links to meetings of the commission, using social media, Facebook, Instagram, even Twitter, to announce these events, these meetings. And then when we're there, have a serious dialogue with the citizens and do our best to take these very complex ideas and try to package them so that anyone can understand and anyone can then ask questions about. And I think that sort of communication will create a much more engaged community, and that down the line, our sort of interaction will create more developed plans that affect the people of Weston more specifically.
Thank you. Ms. Lopez, same question.
Yeah, I remember filling out the form that came in the mail that helps inform the POCD. And I've read the POCD. It's dense, but it's incredibly informative and well written. What I think could be added on is another level of public information and information gathering, as Alex spoke to, having more online Zoom sessions or in person, whatever may come, where people can voice their opinions more thoroughly rather than just filling out a form that might have a list of pick 3 out of the 5 items that brought you to Weston. I think that we can delve deeper into people's opinions.
Thank you. Mr. Carlin.
Thank you, Celeste. One of the things that came out of the public engagement around the village district regulations was some criticism or concern on the part of the public about how the village district regulations themselves comported with or deviated from the POCD. And part of our process was to articulate that everything that we had done in implementing the plan of conservation and development was really the impetus for eventually coming up with and passing those regulations. Are they perfect? No. Nothing that we ever do will be perfect. but are they living and breathing, as Sally said? Yes. And that means that the more we can have outreach to the public, engage them, not even just at a public hearing, but just through public engagement, through technological means, it's important for us to get the feedback from the public too. So we get as much education and information from the public as we're able to give, and it's really helpful to our mission.
Thank you very much. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Korsh. And here is your question. What, if anything, do you see as a responsibility to help enable affordable housing for seniors who wish to downsize, young people, and or town employees?
You broke up a little there. Could you repeat the question?
Of course. What, if anything, do you see as a responsibility to help enable affordable housing for seniors who wish to downsize, young people, or town employees?
Well, I think we do have an obligation to create affordable housing within town. As I think many of us are aware, there is a statutory requirement that we create housing of a diverse type. And I think we have attempted to do that in a small part in the village district. And I say small part because the statistics for the number of affordable units we should have in Weston are rather daunting. If we are charged with having 10% affordable units in Weston, that would be, close to 300 units. We don't. Right now, we have 8. And that means that we have a long ways to go. I think that we have made those efforts, as I said, in the village district with a lot of public input, and tried to design a center that would allow for people to have what I like to call intergenerational housing. That means housing that will reach to our seniors, will reach to empty nesters who are not yet seniors, will reach to those who are working in town, new people coming back, families trying to get a start. We've made the size of that small. We have attempted to make it fit into Weston, and I think we're making the efforts that we need to. I would also like to say that we are subject to, because of our few number of affordable units, we're subject to something called 830G, which is a state statute. Oh, excuse me, of course.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burns, same question.
Well, I certainly think it's important that Weston has the ability for young families and older folks to downsize, because Weston's a wonderful town, and it's just an absolutely lovely place to live. And it's a shame that so many people can't afford to do that. However, and I'm delighted to see that in my reading of the village district, as Sally said, that we're beginning that process of making it possible for downsizing. I just worry that we may, I'm just cautious that we don't rush into it is all. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Lucas, same question.
Thank you. I think Weston's greatest asset is its sense of community. And we need to consider ways to allow community residents to age in place, to provide opportunities for young families and recent graduates to move back to town, and provide a safety net for families who might experience financial hardship. I think there are a variety of ways we can do this. One is in the village district with multifamily housing. The other is to explore allowing ADUs in town. And these are all things that the board is currently doing, and they've done quite a bit of research and a lot of legwork in all of this. The other options are creating cluster housing or subdividing where it is possible in town. Everything is under scrutiny by the board, and I would be very excited to take part in the discussions.
Mr. Carlin, same question.
Thank you. I think the most important part of this process, from my perspective, is that Weston be in charge of coming up with the solution for affordable housing, because we have certain limiting factors in town. We have infrastructure limitations, we have, availability of land limitations. How are we going to do it we started this debate about talking about our sustainability and to operate in an ecologically sensitive manner. That doesn't have to be a competing interest with providing affordable housing in town. You can do it, but I think we want to be in charge of it. I think we know what's best for our town. So I just wanted to make that point. I think the village district, again, to go back to it, to provide for multifamily housing is a great first step. We're going to be talking about accessory dwelling units on the commission in the near future. And that's also going to be part of the solution. It's a multifaceted solution to that problem. But I think people deserve to live here and to stay here.
Thank you. Mr. Farble. Mr. Farble, the question to you.
However, it's okay. First of all, it's a slippery slope to say that we're going to create multi-unit dwellings, even in the village district on the private property, because it's going to impact the rest of the 22 square miles that Weston is. And we can't promise seniors that if we build an affordable housing unit, that just because they're residents of Weston, they're going to be able to get that unit. Just not, it's not going to happen. That there's a legal sense to that. It's one reason why I said we should look at the Jarvis property to replicate the military school dormitories into 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. That we could work with a private, public-private partnership, and that could be an area that could support a number of units. As for town employees, the ruling for affordable housing in our area is for a family of 4, you got to own 90. You have to make $95,000 a year, and many of our employees make more than that.
Thank you so much. The next question will start with Mr. Burns. The legislature mandated zoning law changes, such as permitting an accessory use on every lot in town. How does this ADU concept differ from every homeowner since 1967?
Could you repeat the question? You cut out a few times throughout it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, the question is, the legislature mandated zoning laws, changing such as permitting an accessory dwelling unit or ADU on every lot in town. How does this ADU concept differ from the in-house apartment regulation Weston has provided to every homeowner since 1967?
Admittedly, I'm not particularly familiar with the details of ADUs at the moment, nor am I familiar with the legislation from the state. So I can't, without sounding particularly foolish, answer this question effectively.
Thank you for your honesty. Ms. Locus.
Yes, the legislation is HB 6107, which is the legalization of ADUs. It allows accessory dwellings to be built on a property that is up to 30% of the floor area of the primary dwelling, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. Currently, we allow apartment units within the primary structure that are up to 25% of the floor area. So it does differ greatly. It's the it's the building of additional structures on a property. Even though it's come down from the state, it is up to Weston to decide whether or not we want to implement this HB 6107 or to modify it to work better for our town.
Thank you. Mr. Carlin, same question.
So the accessory units, as I understand it, that have been proposed by the state legislature, they can be detached, so they don't have to be within the existing dwelling, which I think may be a distinguishing factor with what we might allow in our regulations. I'll harken back to my previous response. So this is a mandate from the state legislature, but our town is authorized to opt out of that mandate and come up with our own regulations. And we'll be acting as a board in the near future to really focus on that conversation and make a decision about whether we opt in or opt out of those mandates from the state.
Thank you. Mr. Fallberg, same question.
Well, I'm going to start, be crystal clear. I am dead set against the detached, excuse me, ADUs. It serves no purpose, and specifically, it will not affect our grand list because it says if you build a detached ADU, you can't increase your assessment. If on the other hand, we increase our limits to have an accessory dwelling unit within the confines of a house, 1,000 square feet, that affects the assessment, affects our grand list. And I don't think the state has any right to go and tell us what to do, frankly. And I think there are 169 towns and in our town and they have the right for self-determination.
Thank you. Ms. Korsh, same question.
Thank you. I think that Jim has drawn a good part of the distinction on ADUs versus accessory apartments. The accessory apartments must be within the dwelling, and the primary homeowner must occupy the primary dwelling. ADUs, as Harry points out, are completely detached. We have been given the right to opt out of the state mandated ADUs. And as Jim said, we are looking in the future to have a very detailed and very important discussion with the town members and see how they feel about detached ADUs. We can opt out and develop our own rules. This again is our local zoning power. And we can determine how we want those to look or not to look at all. At the same time, I think we probably will be looking very seriously at the accessory apartment rules to see if those need to be modified to make them more amenable to use in the town.
Thank you. All right, the next question will be started by Ms. Lucas, and the question is, as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, are you in favor of increasing the size of in-house apartments from 800 square feet to 1,000 square feet?
Well, I think this goes back quite a bit to the conversation we just had about ADUs. I don't know if that's really necessary, but I'd be interested to hear what specific homeowners have to say about why they would need to increase that size. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on the matter.
All right, same question to Mr. Carlin.
It seems to me that you're adding probably another bedroom, by increasing the size to or bedroom space to increase occupancy for an accessory apartment. So that gets into issues about how many people should be living in an accessory apartment. And we've heard concerns raised by members of the public about increasing the burden on schools and do we have enough capacity and so forth. Do we have too much capacity? It's another part of the conversation. I think it's something that we would talk about as a commission about whether that change makes sense and what the policy reasons behind it would be. I mean, that there has to be a reason to do everything. It's not just an arbitrary reason. So it would depend upon the rationale behind it.
Thank you. Mr. Fallberg. Mr. Fallberg?
Yeah, I know. We get caught up in what, and we had this case, Sally and I know we had this case that went on for quite some time on a family that wanted to build a 1,000 square foot accessory apartment, and what constitutes it. I think if it's in the confines of a single house, it's allowable, and if it's if it is a real accessory apartment with another family or in-laws or whomever living there, aging parents living in there, that's okay. That's a personal opinion, and I think whether you're a layperson like myself or an attorney like Jim and Sally and understand more of the regulatory issues, we can come up with something that's right for Weston. Again, it needs to be compassionate, it needs to be innovative to our neighbors.
Thank you. Ms. Korch.
Um,
Ms. Korch?
Yes, thank you. As Harry said, we had quite a lengthy discussion after a proposal was made to amend our regulation this year. I think that there were some very interesting issues brought up about increasing the size. What do neighboring towns do? What is usable square footage versus total square footage? And I think we felt that, knowing that the ADU legislation was coming up, we felt that the time to take a look at this would be within the context of that. And I think that's important. Again, this is public input. This is try to determine what our town feels is the best result for our town. And we will go through that process again.
Thank you. Mr. Burns?
Well, I feel it's important we take any step in reforming this with serious thought behind it. As Jim said, you shouldn't just do something with no reason. And Weston has its zoning regulations the way they do for specific reasons based around our previously mentioned, particularly around our previously mentioned conservation, environmentally friendly attitude. And if we're going to make any changes to these sorts of things, we should be very cautious in that we don't upset or don't harm or potentially harm our environment in a short term, if we only look at something in the short term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the next question, we'll start with Mr. Carlin. At the selectmen debate, the candidates expressed positive interest in the mandate creating 2 separate housing units on one lot. Do you anticipate a conflict with the Board of Selectmen?
I don't remember exactly what property they were referring to, or if they were referring to a specific property, or if they were just having a general policy discussion. I mean, if they're talking about town land, of course, and that's their purview and not ours as a commission, although we do have the ability to provide input. Again, I think it just depends upon the specific context that they're looking at that as a possibility. What the property is, where the property is located, what the reasons are for the proposal, and that whatever decision that we would make as a commission, we would be acting on behalf of all residents, not acting on behalf of a board of selectmen or any particular contractor for the proposal. So I'd need to know a little bit. I don't have all the details on exactly what their discussion was, but as far as conflicts with the Board of Selectmen or any other entity in town, we have disagreements from time to time, but I think we act responsibly and we act with empathy and understanding for our various different positions and what our missions are. And I think for the most part, we tend to reach reasonable compromises on issues when we have to.
Thank you. Same question. Mr. Fallber?
I'm sorry. You were frozen.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I think the 3 members of the BOS can opine on anything they want. If they happen to like detached accessory dwelling units, so be it. I think our goal for the town in planning and zoning is to take input from virtually every committee, every commission, every resident, and also, does it make sense? our zone, 2-acre zoning was not based on living a great life. It was based on the aquifer and what a family of 4 will need to pull up out of the ground, and how do we protect it for the future. So yeah, I'm happy to have a conversation with the Board of Selectmen, as I am with the HDC, as everyone else, including within my colleagues on planning and zoning. And we do have differences of opinions.
Thank you. Ms. Korsh, same question.
Thank you. I believe that the context for that statement was within the ADUs, as Harry highlights. And I think that this is the heart of the discussion. We appreciate, and we want to be sure that the town appreciates, that this whole ADU discussion can result in a change to the way that Weston will look. And we want to be sure that we have as much public input and debate from all members of our community, not only the boards and commissions, but all of the citizens. I mean, this is a very fundamental issue. For some people, having the accessory dwelling unit may mean that they are able to keep their parents or unmarried children on their property. It may also mean essential income for them. On the other hand, that will put a strain conceivably on our public resources. What do? I think we need to look to our citizens and to our residents to find out what we think is the best way to move forward.
All right, Mr. Burns.
Well, it's important. It is, as Jim said, to know the specifics of the property before we make any serious decisions on this sort of endeavor. However, our natural resources are finite, and around particularly our water. And if we put too many people on too small of an acreage, we can run the risk of potentially harming our water. And so while I'm all open to discussion and seeing with the BOS and the rest of the P&Z commission, I'm cautious and would not make any statement in support or against such an initiative at this time. And I think it is best if we spoke with the people of Weston about it and gained their input so we could make an educated decision.
Thank you. Ms. Lopez, same question to you.
Hi, yeah, I agree with what Sally was saying about ADUs essentially changing the fabric of our town. Whether that's for the better or the worse, I don't know, but it is important to gauge the public tolerance for this type of change to decide if it's something we want to undertake. If the Board of Selectmen is in support of it, then certainly we would work with them and state our opinions. If this is something that happens on public land, then it's not something that the board really has to say in the final decision. The board just give their advice to the Board of Selectmen and they take it from there.
Thank you. The next question will start with Mr. Falber. Do you support the initiatives in the town plan of conservation and development and the village district regulations?
No, not entirely. I don't understand in the expanded village district how we can move from about 25,000 square feet to potential of 130,000 square feet. We've never done an environmental nor an economic impact study. So, independently, that we should have started with that. That's my opinion. And I haven't changed it. I fought for the exclusion of a firearms store within our village district, which was not part of the original plan. I fought for the inclusion of microbreweries or brew houses, as well as the question is very hard because there are so many different areas of the POCD and the affordable housing plan and the expanded village district. But you have to be honest is that, and Sally has sat with me and she's heard my comments from the get-go, that I've raised concerns and I continue to raise concerns. That doesn't mean that I'm right. That means that I have concerns and that I've done a lot of homework as I see it. So, and I think we need it. I think we need that diversity of opinion on planning and zoning as well as working with other commissions and committees to say what is really right in the long term and the short term for Weston.
Thank you. Ms. Korsh, same question.
I do support the village district. It was, the regulations were enacted unanimously by the board. It was very much a collaborative process. I think it's important that people realize that this is the investment of private capital into Weston. It is not any public development whatsoever. And I think we have to look to the market and to private capital to make the decisions about what may be good for Weston. And trust me, you'll have a lot of oversight on that from financial institutions, individuals, and the like. We are enabled under our regulations to have any type of professional consultant weigh in on water, sewer, and the like at the cost of the proposed developer. So I feel that we are definitely protected as a town to try to get a good template in place for what could be a very vibrant and exciting addition to the town.
Thank you. Mr. Burns, same question.
Well, I absolutely support the village district. As a young man, I'm only a few years out of Weston High School, not class of 2017, and I very much was upset as a young man that I would have to drive about 30 minutes to go in any direction to go just about anywhere. And I think that the ability for private capital to come into Weston to provide our young families and children with potentially closer amenities is a wonderful thing. Now, for those concerned about change, well, it's again to the private sector to make these developments. Weston Town Center looked the same as it did. Weston Town Center looks the same as it did 20 years ago, and 20 years from now, it may look exactly the same. It's just by the initiative of the private sector, and that's something I absolutely support, so that it allows our young families and young children, who I was not too long ago, the ability to enjoy more of Weston and make them want to stay and make them want to really become part of our community.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Lucas, same question to you.
I am thrilled with the passing of the village district overlay. I know that when the plan of conservation and development came out and the town was polled, a vast majority of town members supported it. I think it was 71%. And I'm sure that if you did that poll now, it would be even higher now that we have so many new young families moving to town. I think it's high time that we have more amenities, convenience amenities in our town, a place to grab a latte. This is just a change to zoning, and it is going to take quite a while for anything to really come to fruition. So it will be gradual, and I think the board has put in place safety guards to protect our environment and the traffic, and you know, it's very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. We have Mr. Carlin. Same question.
I do support the village district regulations. I voted to pass those regulations along with the rest of the commission. Again, are they perfect? No. Are there things in there that I would like to have seen tweaked? Maybe. If I went back through them, I could probably pick some things out. I think all of us probably could. But it was a bipartisan, rational, deliberative process, open to the public. And I was very proud of the effort that my fellow commission members made to pass those regulations. Again, what's the big criticism that you'll hear? We can't even keep a market open in town. So who are we to think we're going to create a vibrant village district? We might not, but we have to have the regulatory framework in place to make that kind of capital investment possible. Otherwise, nobody's going to make the investment without the appropriate regulatory regime. So stay tuned.
Thank you. All right, the next question will start with Ms. Korsh. And the question is, considering the effects of changes in weather patterns and storm intensity, are Weston zoning regulations effective in the area of drainage and detention facilities, etc.?
Well, I have to be honest, I haven't really looked at retention facilities. I know I see retention ponds around, and I would tell you that I don't think they're maintained quite as we had hoped they would be. But that is an issue of enforcement, not an issue of regulation. I would also say, as a citizen driving around when we have some of these severe storms, you see considerable runoff. One thing I am concerned about is the amount of paving that we sometimes see on private driveways, where we create rivers where there weren't any before. But again, those are private concerns. Are those matters that could be regulated? We could come up with perhaps suggestions for new driveway materials. We certainly in subdivisions come up with requirements for drainage and retention. We come up with requirements for offsite storage of water if necessary, for fire suppression systems, which sometimes is a retention pond. So I think that that's an issue that certainly is a very dynamic one in this town, and one, as you say, or as suggested, will be of considerable concern as we might see good additional rainfall rather than snowfall going forward. Again, I think that that is a regional issue, one that I think we would like to very much be a part of going forward.
Mr. Burns.
Well, I certainly think that with the change of weather that we ought to examine our regulations regarding this, but I think by and large, we've got something that works well. I think older water studies show that about only a quarter of our rainfall actually goes into the ground. And so while we have to be worried about the use of runoff and where it goes and all that, I think I think by and large, I think it's going to stand the test of time for the time being. If we have a monsoon, maybe things should change, but odds are, I think, with slight adjustment, if at all, our zoning regulations are where they ought to be.
Thank you. Ms. Lopez, would you care to comment on this question?
Yeah, I have to admit it's not something I'm very familiar with, and how our regulations really impact the weather events that we have. We do limit the amount of impervious surface that someone can put on their land and the amount of development one can put on. It may be in the purview of the health district if the stormwater runoff and drainage plans of particular properties. But I'm not sure that's a zoning thing, and I may be incorrect.
Right. Mr. Carlin.
It's definitely worth looking at. I'll just echo everybody else's statements. I'm not an expert on the technical matters either, but if climate change is the new reality, and if we are going to be facing, as Sally said, rainstorms in the winter instead of snowstorms, that's obviously going to have an impact. Now, I'm reminded of the state regulations that went into effect to regulate private dams on private property because they weren't being maintained. So I think maintenance is definitely a problem. And I think one of the other limiting factors we have in town is that a couple of our major roadways in town that are subject to flooding are state roads, and we don't have the ability to regulate state roads, but drainage and proper drainage of water on our roadways and streets is a problem. It's probably an increasing problem, and I think we should probably put that on our agenda to take a look at those regulations and have a discussion about it.
Thank you. Mr. Falber, same question.
Well, I think look at what we have left in our town. I think we have about maybe 30, 40, 50 building lots left to have housing on. If we look at changing regulations, we're really looking at retrofitting every one of the 3,500 other homes that have already been built. There are other things we can do. Stormwater runoff off roofs and can be used for collection, for irrigation, for watering lawns. Those are possibilities. Changing weather and climate conditions are something that's comes from a much higher authority than us, and I think it's really hard for us to regulate what may be caused by issues in China or volcanoes or just inappropriate use of fossil fuels. I
All
don't know how
right.
to, I don't know how to do that.
Thank you. The next question I will send to Mr. Burns to start off. How do you see your recommendations for shared parking in downtown Weston coming to fruition?
Could you repeat the question?
How do you see your recommendations for shared parking in downtown Weston coming to fruition?
Well, admittedly, once again, I'm not the most well versed on this, but I think what's important is if we're going to implement any form of shared parking, is that it's done responsibly, that it's done with input from the town, and that it's conscious of all residents in the area, just so we don't overpack an area. And so, yeah, those would be my concerns.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas, same question to you.
Well, this question is starting off with two people who did not write the village district portion of our zoning regulations. So we are the least knowledgeable about this, but I believe it has to do with new development, being able to share the asset of parking, which I would assume has to do with reducing the overall number of required spaces and paving material. I don't think we ever have a parking issue in our town. If you look at our village center right now, all those amenities share parking and there's ample parking spaces. So it would just have to do with allotting the appropriate number of spaces, possibly reserved spaces for specific tenants and residents to make sure that there's no competition for the available spaces.
Mr. Carlin.
One of the concerns that folks raised with a potential for redeveloping the village district is if you have all of these new amenities, if you have all of these new retail stores, if you have a larger market in town, for example, where are people going to park and how are you going to manage parking? I don't think there's a way to successfully do this without engaging with surrounding landowners. I think you're going to have some memorandum of understanding with the church. You're going to have to potentially leverage the municipal parking at the school to give people areas in which they can safely park without, endangering themselves and without creating, a traffic nightmare at or near the four corners of town. So I think parking is certainly a concern. We're certainly cognizant of it. We didn't want to stop the zoning regulations and the development of those plans to solve every conceivable parking problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Same question to Mr. Falber.
I come out from a business background, a small business background, and I've worked for large corporations as well. I don't understand the whole concept of shared parking because for me, hell will freeze over before I am going to tell a private landowner that she or he has to share their parking with other businesses in town. That we're entering an area that just bothers me greatly. We may have to figure out how do we use public land for that. But I am not for forcing or coercing private landowners to be altruistic and say, oh yes, you can park here, even if you're not shopping here. I just don't buy that.
All right, Ms. Korch.
I think we see shared parking in many types of shopping centers. I don't think that it is a problem when you have separately owned properties, you have easements, you have rights of people to cross over your property. As Jim said, I think this can be dealt with. I think it's something that we did not want to put a stop to the village district regulations by trying to come up with every conceivable configuration of how to share parking. I also think that as motorists in Weston, most of us know how shared parking works. And I think that it's certainly a solvable problem if it is a problem.
All right, now we're on to our last question, and it's going to start with Ms. Lucas. And the question is, Planning and zoning is in favor of strengthening our center of town. Is the school campus, town hall, and the library included in the village district?
Specifically, no, they are not. That's town-owned property. It's not part of the village district. Though the ability to link all these portions together would be part of the zoning commission's, I think, future plan of development, and the town as well, the implementation of sidewalks. Yeah, I apologize. I can't speak more to the subject.
All right, thank you. Mr. Carlin, same question to you.
Yeah, I don't think the village district doesn't touch the schools. I think that was part of your question. It doesn't touch the library. There was some discussion on the board about, just looking ahead without trying to come up with a redevelopment plan, because that is not our mission. But for example, you have buses parked in their current location near Weston Center. If you're going to redevelop that part of town at some point in the future, then there may be a higher and better use of other property for the placement of those buses. And that would open up that area of town property to be used and incorporated into, a Main Street type configuration, for example. But no, we're not looking to impact the schools directly, or the library directly, or the police station for that matter. I think we were pretty deliberate in drawing the village district the way that we did.
Thank you. Mr. Fallberg, same question to you.
I don't think planning and zoning should ever have a right to make a comment, a deliberative statement on what happens on town property, school road or the town campus. This separation in a way of church and state. I will always be for planning and zoning to work on regulatory issues for all the private properties in Weston, including the 1/3 square mile, which is the expanded village district. I don't want to see us opine on School Road. I don't want to see us opine on the fire department, EMS, or town hall, or the library.
Thank you. Ms. Korsh.
One town property is in fact included in the village district, and that is the Jarvis property. But as has been pointed out, we do not have any zoning authority over town property. We have suggested that it could be a part of the village district with mixed use buildings, including residential, but it is not anything that we could mandate, nor should we. The town long ago opted out of being under the authority of the zoning regulations, and that is the way that it will stay, I am sure. However, should they choose to repurpose that property, or as Harry mentioned, or Jim mentioned, the bus garage, those are areas that we can then incorporate into a walkable total village district.
Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Well, I don't think there's much else to say on this. Obviously, no, the schools are not part of the village district, and as has been beaten to death by this point, the Planning and Zoning Committee has no regulation over public property. So I think that what's been said has been said, and I would hope that maybe down the line there could be a further integration of the village district. But at the moment, I see no need to, and I think it's fine as it is.
Good. Thank you very much. It's time now for our closing statements. Each of you will be given 2 minutes for a closing statement, and we'll start with Mr. Carlin.
Thank you very much. And thanks again to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. And thanks to my fellow candidates. I've lived in this town for 20 years, and that's a long time by our current standards. And I've had the privilege of serving on the zoning commission back in 2013, and then the zoning board of appeals for a couple of years as well. And I just have found it to be very rewarding. And we're at a crucial time, I think, in our town's history. You know, we've been stagnant. We've been stagnant in terms of our population growth. We have not necessarily evolved even gradually as a town with respect to amenities. We're losing, I think, to a large extent, our competitive advantage as a town. As a zoning commission, we certainly can't snap our fingers and change any of those realities. What we can do is act responsibly, act deliberately, act thoughtfully to try and create a regulatory framework in the context of planning to help enhance our town and to allow for further and responsible development within our town. That's what's drawn me back to the commission. And I think we have worked extremely successfully as Republicans and Democrats and otherwise on the commission towards that goal. And I'm looking forward to completing the work and continuing the work and then tackling all the other challenges that we have ahead of us as a commission, because there are several in the very near term. So I thank everybody for the opportunity to be here this morning and looking forward to continuing the process as we move towards the November election. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Mr. Fallberg, your closing statement.
Well, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, but I'm also part of the steering committee, so I think that's a little bit disingenuous. But I have recused myself from anything that has to do with any of the debates at the moment that I was certified by the state to be a petitioning candidate. I have a unique perspective. I am not unaware that all the votes I received 4 years ago was because of my name recognition. I've got 25 years invested in this town because I met a wonderful lady who happens to have been on School Road for 25 years. And if your kids have gone through K-12, chances are you know my last name. I am fortunate in that as a candidate as I was 4 years ago. What I really believe is that we need more compassion, we need more creativity, we need more innovation. I was a proponent 3 years ago to create the Onion Barn Park. I worked with the Weston Health District to actually say that we could repurpose the Onion Barn and turn it into a coffee shop, which is exactly what our town survey said we wanted. I believe in food trucks. I would love to see Bisegli in the winter turned into an ice skating rink. We actually could probably make it revenue generating. I'd like to replicate the New York City's Bryant Park shopping district on our town property, offering small businesses sheds that they could use to sell their wares or services. So, I think that's what planning and planning zoning is about. Yeah, there's long-term goals, but there are short-term goals as well. And I don't view this as red or blue. The largest body of people we have in our town are people who are not affiliated with either party. I would hope that, as I believe I've done, is I've represented all of them, and I will continue to.
Thank you. Ms. Korsh.
Thank you. I'd like to emphasize that we are your local zoning board. We plan and regulate the development of Weston, and we create zoning to control land use. I'm fortunate to be a member that saw the development of the village district regulations, and I'm honestly excited to see that template in place. I do think that the approaching land use issues for Weston should be and will be met with transparency, public input, and open deliberation. As a commission, we will continue to need engagement and varied opinions as we meet the needs of all of our residents, new and old. I see that the candidates encompass both new and old residents, and I think that's great. I hope to continue to apply my experience and excitement about Weston as a planning and zoning commissioner. And I thank you all for watching today, submitting your questions, and being supportive of the board as its planning and zoning function. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burns.
I just want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters, my fellow candidates, and all those who decided to watch. It's not easy getting up this early on a Saturday morning. I have been a Weston resident since I think I moved here in the 4th grade, and I went through the intermediate, middle, and high school. And at the time, I didn't quite appreciate Weston. I found it to be a bit boring at times, and it was because as a young man, I wanted to be. I didn't want to have to. I didn't want to drive everywhere. I didn't. It was annoying, and I didn't quite appreciate what I had. And I went off to college and I came back, and it dawned on me how special this town is, and all of it, the people, the nature, even the annoying distances that I sometimes have to go to get anywhere. And it made me realize that this town had given me so much, and I wanted to give back to it. And I understand that I'm young, and I'm still not as well versed in all of the details of planning and zoning, but I promise that I am a quick learner, and I will do my best to know the ins and outs of planning and zoning in town. And I think that I represent a younger echelon of Weston that sometimes feels a bit shut out by the sometimes older representation on the boards. And there's nothing wrong with experience, but I think youth is vital to keeping Weston growing and expanding. And so I think it's important that we as a community have a variety of opinions. And I think I represent, as I said, a younger group. And so I just want to repeat my thanks and say thank you all for coming out, and thank you again.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce myself, really, because I'm a relatively new face and newcomer to town. My name is Megan Lucas. I'm a licensed architect and a 5-year resident of Weston. I'm a transplant from Los Angeles. In case it wasn't clear here today, I am not a practiced public speaker. I'm a residential architect, and I primarily design sustainable and highly energy efficient homes like a passive house and net zero. I work primarily in the tri-state region. I spend a great deal of my time in front of my computer performing tasks such as zoning research, highly applicable here today. I have projects spanning from California to Nova Scotia, and I've worked in some of the most restrictive zoning municipalities in the country. I have a BA from Northwestern and a master's in architecture from UCLA. I'm a member of the American Institute of Architects, AIA, and the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association. Currently, I am an alternate on the Zoning Board of Appeals and a member of the Weston Building Committee. I am a wife and a mother to 2 girls, most importantly, aged 6 and 3. So we are new to the school system, and we're in Weston for the long haul. I have a vested interest not just in the 10-year plan, but in the 30, 40, and 50-year town development plans. In the short term that I've lived in Weston, the face of our local government has started to shift, better representing the demographic makeup of our town. It's critical to listen to different voices in the community when making public policy decisions. I hope you'll elect me to be your voice on the public and on planning and zoning, and to bring my experience, my enthusiasm for our wonderful town, and my unapologetic and admittedly slightly embarrassing love of zoning regulations to this commission. Thank you for your time, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for keeping people informed.
Well, I want to thank all of you as really very well-versed and compatible candidates. The town of Weston is indeed very lucky to have you, and I wish you all the very best of luck on election day. Now, Helen,
Yes.
would you care to give us a nice farewell, League style?
I'm working on it, but
That's
I
also
can
League
at
style.
least be heard. And Cole, maybe you can, there we are, okay. I just want to thank everybody, Celeste, of course, and all of our candidates and our timers, and Cole, for making today's very good and thoughtful conversation possible. The League hopes that you will go to our website. Again, it's LWVWestonCT.org to see the voter's guide and to view all of these events. This one will be posted in a couple of days, probably by Tuesday, if not even Monday. So we look forward to a good election. And again, thank you all for being willing to step up to serve this very special town. Thank you, and vote to the public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you.